The next area of exploration for the Inner Earth expedition to discover the source of the legend is a region near the North Pole, the land from whence the warm wind blows, the source of the Aurora Borealis, the place where it's said there lays an elusive opening between a surface world where the sun shines and the stars twinkle in the night, and an inner world, a land with no horizon. One might think that with today's capabilities in the fields of satellite photography and geophysical surveys, that the existence of an inner Earth would have either been proven or refuted by the existing data. Sadly, we have no way of knowing, because the powerful entities who control such data from the polar regions have seen to it that this knowledge remains secret. Most of us are familiar with our world as we view it from weather satellites on the evening news. These satellites go around the planet from east to west or from west to east. There are a few satellites called polar satellites that go around the Earth, North and South Pole. However, data is not available to the public for a view of the North Pole or the South Pole, only the center section. There are only a few polar satellites. In February of 2006, the federal government issued a data denial implementation plan which secures the continued flow of real-time meteorological satellite data from the NOAA, provided instruments on board EUMETSAT's METCOP spacecraft to public duty users in the United States. During episodes that might otherwise require data denial, data denial means real-time data from U.S. environmental instruments can be denied during periods of crisis or war. There are no publicly available images of the North Pole. When a solar flare occurs, cosmic radiation leaps out into space, crossing the distance from the Sun to the Earth in about 73 hours. As it approaches the planet, it can often form an aurora borealis, also known as the northern lights, ribbons of light as cosmic radiation turns into light above our planet, approaching from the north or the south pole of our planet. But what would cause an aurora borealis to form over both poles at the same time? Find out as we explore our world during the North Pole Inner Earth expedition. In this slide of space photography, one can see the city lights blurred below as the beautiful blue-green aurora borealis is captured with the solar wind passing gracefully around the planet Earth. Solar flares explode from the sun's surface hundreds of thousands of miles into space. These emit X-rays, high-energy particles, and gamma rays that travel on a solar wind to Earth in about 73 hours. The Earth's magnetosphere is generated by the crust rotating around a solid metallic core. Without this magnetosphere, the surface of the Earth would be completely sterilized. Unlike traditional gravity theories, gravity actually centers in the crust of the Earth. Are there openings in the Earth's crust that lead to an interior world? We are about to explore and find out. Unlike traditional gravity theories, gravity actually centers in the crust of the Earth. Are there openings in the Earth's crust that lead to an interior world? We are about to explore and find out. Originally, as the Earth formed from particles surrounding the Sun in what's called an accretion disk, the Earth formed in a ball and exhibited a condition called overspin. As the crust expanded, the Earth slowed down to its present rate. What is left behind is a gap between the core and the crust. Molten rock fills in the gaps left by the expansion of Earth's crust. Earth was once 1/3 its present diameter. It's easily seen that all of the continents once fit together like a key and a lock. The crust has expanded enough so that now ocean fills in the space between the continents. One can see from this graph that in the last 25 years, earthquakes have increased in intensity and frequency. The rate of increase is alarming. Every time there is a major earthquake, geologists collect an MRI of the Earth. That is to say, vibrations travel from the point of earthquake to the other side of the planet, where precision accelerometers reveal a detailed picture of what the Earth may look like on the inside. Unfortunately, each time one of these events occurs, there is a series of shadow waves or unexplained waves left behind. This example out of a common textbook is exactly what geological students see each year. Each time they have to accommodate the shadow zone. We believe this is a broken model, as does Jan Lambrecht, who also took the same math data and worked it backwards to see if the MRI could reveal the true structure of the inner Earth. In this slide, you can see there is a model that works without exception every time. As the vibration occurs on one side of the planet, it passes through the crust, but does not pass through the open air area between the crust and the core. Instead, it passes freely around, reflecting to the other side. There are no shadow zones in this model. The math works perfectly every time. In actuality, as the Earth forms, it forms into a sphere rather than a solid ball. The center of gravity, as shown here, is actually in the middle of the crust. Think of it as if you were standing in an elevator on a bathroom scale, and the elevator traveled to the center of the Earth from the surface. As you went lower and lower, your body weight would actually drop, until when you finally reach the center of the Earth, your body weight might actually be negative. According to Newtonian physics, as matter coagulates or aggregates in space, the amount of gravity associated with that mass increases with its weight. If those Newtonian physics are in fact accurate, while you're in the center of the Earth, you would actually weigh nothing, because all of the mass of the Earth would be above you. This is why planets form into spheres and not solid balls. In actuality, the acceleration of gravity that we feel on the surface is about 32 feet per second squared. However, standing on the inside of the crust, as though you were standing in China, only on the inside of the Earth, the acceleration would be about a third less, or about 21 feet per second squared. The open-air gap between the inside of the crust and what many theorists believe is an inner sun may be as much as 1,200 miles of open air. To put that in perspective, the space shuttle flies at about 200 miles above the surface of the Earth. High-altitude aircraft fly at about 8 miles above the planet. We have about 3 miles of breathable atmosphere on the surface of our planet, whereas in the inner Earth there may be as much as 800 to 1,000 miles of breathable atmosphere. The inner sun may be a glowing ball of metal, providing inner heat and a soft glow for the interior of the Earth. Without a sundown event, there would be no night or day on the inner Earth, simply a soft twilight 24 hours a day. A temperature equilibrium may form, with a minimum of weather. However, with a vast atmosphere, a tropical environment low in solar radiation may form the perfect environment for long life and giantism among plants and animals. The idea behind a North Pole passage is that there is a hole or an opening in the crust equalizing the pressure from the interior to the exterior of the planet. The ocean actually coats the crust on the inside and outside of the crust, meaning that there is an outer ocean upon which we sail and an inner ocean, an ocean with no horizon. What we are about to undertake may be the greatest geological expedition in the history of the world. The builders of Rosslyn Chapel in the year 1442 wanted us to know the true nature of the earth. Directly above the altar, in the center front of the chapel, in the ceiling, lowered down and carefully ornately carved, a hollow world with an interior sun.
There are many cosmological traditions around the world which share important features of Bhagavata cosmology. These include a cosmic axial mountain or pillar, which is often identified with a local mountain, such as Mount Olympus in Greece. These traditions also include other standard features, including those shown in this generic world model. The cosmology of the Bhagavatam and the Puranas is shared in its broad features by Buddhism, and it is widespread in the Buddhist countries of Asia. This East Asian picture depicts a square version of Mount Meru and the oceans and islands of Bhumandala, surmounted by planetary orbits. This Korean wheel map shows a central continent surrounded by a circular ocean and another circular continent. Joseph Needham, in his treatise on Chinese science, traces these wheel maps to India or Babylon. Here is a Babylonian wheel map. Wheel maps were also made in medieval Europe. In these Judeo-Christian maps, Jerusalem and the sacred hill called Mount Zion were identified as the world axis. Somehow or other, the tradition of Jambudweep seems to have influenced Gerardus Mercator, who placed a mountain surrounded by a circular continent at the north pole of his map of the Arctic region. The four perpendicular rivers or channels flowing from the central mountain correspond to the four branches of the celestial Ganges flowing from Mount Meru. Here is a Phoenician seal with a personified world mountain and four streams issuing forth at right angles. The Dogon tribe, living near the upper bend of the Niger River, posit a circular continent with a central pillar surmounted by the residence of their high god Amma. Note the world-girdling serpent in the circular ocean. The ethnologist Evans Wentz identifies this Navajo sand painting as a representation of the four sacred directional mountains of the Navajos. In many traditions, the world mountain is surrounded by four mountains in the cardinal directions, and we also see this in the Bhagavatam and other Puranas. The color scheme is similar to that found in Puranic and Buddhist traditions. The four directional mountains of Jambudweep have four sacred trees on their summits. These include the Jambu tree, after which Jambudweep is named. The theme of a cosmic tree of life is very common, and this tree often grows on the world mountain or stands in place of it. Here we see the Scandinavian tree of life called Yggdrasil. The apocryphal biblical literature describes a tree of life with four rivers of honey, milk, oil, and wine that flow down into Eden. For comparison, the Bhagavatam has rivers of special juices flowing from its four sacred trees. This Assyrian seal shows the tree of life on the world mountain plus two sacred streams. In this East Asian picture, the tree of life stands upon the column of Mount Meru, centered on the ring pattern of Bhumandala. The Mayans of Central America have a tree of life that extends through seven heavens, and they also speak of five lower worlds. Graded heavens and underworlds are found in many cosmologies, including that of the Bhagavatam. Here we see the cosmology of the Shipibo tribe of the Peruvian Montea. This includes the tree of life, the circular continent and surrounding ocean, and the world-girdling serpent. The cosmology of the Warao of the Orinoco Delta also features a serpent of being that surrounds their world. Here we see the Norse serpent that surrounds Midgard, the inhabited world of Norse cosmology. The Bhagavatam places a universal serpent called Anantashesha beneath Bhumandala. He is generally depicted as supporting the earth from beneath, but the Mahabharata also says that he encircles her in his coils. The Bhagavatam places the cities of Brahma and the 8 Lokapalas on top of Mount Meru. Similarly, many traditions place the abode of the gods on top of their axial mountain or pillar. Here is the geometric layout of the cities of the 8 Lokapalas, or world guardians. These figure in the Vastu Purusha Mandala used to lay out temples in traditional Indian architecture. The grid of the Vastu Purusha Mandala is also associated with the nakshatra constellations marking the ecliptic. Thus the earthly side of a temple was connected with the heavenly realm of the ecliptic. The Bhumandala disk represents the exoteric domains of the earth and planets. In contrast, the cosmic axis, extending perpendicular to Bhumandala, is filled with esoteric meaning. It represents the path of ascent or descent of the soul. In addition to the orbits of the sun, moon, and planets, there are different worlds or lokas arrayed above Bhumandala along the cosmic axis. These upper worlds can be entered through mystic cities, and they are accessible only to persons of advanced spiritual consciousness. The Bhagavatam describes the vertical dimension of the Brahmanda as a universal form of God, extending from the lowest world at the soles of the feet to the highest at the crown of the head. In this traditional picture, we see the rings of Bhumandala forming the belt of the universal form. Here the positions of the worlds are indicated in relation to the universal form. The levels in the universal form are associated with the spinal chakras on which yogis meditate, and the spine itself is called Meru Danda, after Mount Meru, the cosmic axis. The ascent of the soul through different levels of the Brahmanda is analogous to the ascent of the life force through the chakras in the body. In general, the vertical dimension of the universe represents the path of ascent or descent of the soul through different worlds and different states of consciousness. It lies perpendicular to the plane of Bhumandala, which is the world of the planetary orbits.
Here we have a rotating sphere of water about 25 millimeters in diameter, and inside this sphere are a whole bunch of little tiny air bubbles. And we will see what the angular acceleration due to rotation does to these air bubbles as a function of time. What you are observing are the bubbles moving to the center axis of rotation. As a function of time, they will form this rather tightly packed bubble core. These bubbles are kept from coalescing from a small amount of added surfactant to the water. Here we have a rotating sphere filled with bubbles and tea leaves, and as expected, the bubbles go to the center and the tea leaves go to the outside edge, along with a few chunks of orange peel. Here we have a rotating sphere with bubbles and chunks from breaking up a small vitamin tablet. And the bubbles go to the center core, but the vitamin chunks seem to stay in their location dispersed through the sphere. And from this we deduced that the vitamin chunks have a density near that of water.
There is a direct connection to electromagnetic fields and the spirit realm. Observable to anyone experienced in the deliverance type of ministries, it is well known that there is a direct connection to demonic spirits and their ability to manipulate electricity and electrical appliances. There is a measurable fluctuation in magnetic fields, ozone readings, and room temperatures by the presence of so-called ghosts, which are actually demonic entities. With UFOs, the EM pulses bring car engines to a halt and batteries drained or lights turned off. These same anomalies exist in all types of paranormal activities, suggesting the same interactive physics exists for them all and are somehow connected to electricity and electromagnetic fields. This is very important to know because this connection to electromagnetic forces explains another text of Scripture and explains Satan's ultimate reason for helping to set these kind of events up. There may be scripture and other ancient texts that confirm this electromagnetic connection to spiritual beings as well. In my articles and in my book, I talk about the clouds of heaven as defined by the Bible. Interchangeable use of clouds and cherubs suggests an angelic vehicle, and in context they are always mentioned as traveling on the wings of the wind. There is no further definition to what the wings of the wind means in the Bible. However, the book of Enoch devotes an entire chapter, chapter 8, to the description of the wings as gravity. It concludes this description with the inclusion to the pathway of the angels. The implication is alluding to the electromagnetic grid around the earth mentioned in Ezekiel 28 as an intertwining fence and the pathway of the angels. I believe under the inspiration of the Holy Spirit, the Lord was showing me the physics that ties all of these entities together by the means of these electromagnetic forces. In addition to the grid, there are 4 points that are central to being 4 corners of the earth. It has been suggested that Solomon's temple is a type of this within the building. There are 4 main pillars that are not measured, representing 2 different axes of pits that are bottomless. As 2 axis planes on earth. We understand the north and south poles as one axis, but where are the other 2 points going east and west? In the western hemisphere off the coast of Florida and touching a point in Bermuda, we have an area called the Devil's Triangle. The same anomalous magnetic disturbances happen there as with UFOs, demonic activity, and ghost activity. If you were to drill a hole from the Devil's Triangle, exactly the opposite side of the Earth on a 33.3 degree latitude line is the Dragon Sea. Connected, they represent the ethereal, bottomless pit. The place Jesus said was the Great Gulf Fix, separating the upper chamber of a hollow earth from the lower. It is the electromagnetic pit that is sometimes open, sometimes closed, as described in Job 41. They will be folded together by a manipulation of gravity, and that is where CERN comes in, and we will get to that at the end of the video. The 4 corners of the earth. The earth has no actual corners, and this is also alluding to the 4 magnetic points upon the earth. These magnetic currents also control the ocean currents, which controls our weather. If the rivers of Eden, as H.M. Howe stated in his book Cosmic Problem Solved in 1895, are actually the 4 ocean currents flowing out of the North Pole opening back into the South Pole opening, it can give a whole new meaning to a couple of other prophetic verses that continue to speak the same story to us about this release. If the rivers mentioned in the Bible flowing from Eden are in fact rivers in the sense of a flow or current of electromagnetic forces that create the ocean currents, it may give a whole new understanding to strange things that seem to be happening with the rivers Euphrates. There are 2 problems with the literal interpretation as a geographical river. Number 1, there has never been 4 geographical rivers found to exist that are in the geographical harmony to the Scripture's description. The 4 rivers as ocean currents mentioned by H.M. Howe do seem to fit the biblical description. There is a mention that the Euphrates River must dry up in order for the kings of the East to pass over into this Battle of Armageddon. In modern battle tactics and technology, a river is no longer a prevention to stop anything a modern army could want to do. The suggestion that disembodied spirits possess a Chinese army is not supported by the Scriptures anywhere. In harmony to the main thought of these prisoners being set free out of a pit from the altering of a magnetic polar shift begins to make much more sense. This release is in the physical plane, not disembodied spirits, which is a thought fully supported by the Scriptures. Consider then what the Bible could be saying in Revelation 9:14-16 and Revelation 16:12. Revelation 9:14 through 16, release the 4 angels who are bound at the great river Euphrates. And the 4 angels who had been prepared for the hour and the day and month and year were released, so that they would kill 1/3 of mankind. The number of the armies of the horsemen was 200 million. First, understand that the word in the Greek for Euphrates means outpouring waters, as in a flood or floodwaters. Also understand that the Lord said in his word he had stored up these flood waters as a heap like a stone upon the opening of the hollow earth, which is in the Antarctic. Job 38:25 and Psalms 33:7. He gathereth the waters of the sea as a heap. He layeth up the depths in storehouses. The waters are hid as with a stone, and the face of the deep is frozen. Now here is an army of darkness gathered up for this very moment, because this was their destiny, ordained by God, and just what all the other scriptures warn us about. They are held in reserve to a specific prophetic end, which is further described here in this text of scripture. The sixth angel in Revelation 16:12, the sixth angel poured out his bowl on the great river Euphrates, and its water was dried up, so that the way would be prepared for the kings of the east. What follows the Nephilim as the kings of the east are Cain and his descendants. They were removed from the surface of the earth to the inner realm, a subterranean land called Nod, east of Eden. Now, if the hollow earth exists as the Bible indicates, that would mean that they are the real kings of the east and not the Chinese assumed and claimed by most Bible prophecy teachers today. These are the locusts coming out of the pit and opening from the South Pole, open because the Euphrates, as one of the ocean currents, has recently slowed down and has caused the South Pole in the Antarctic to begin melting at an alarming rate. This melting of the floodwaters from before is now the drying up process mentioned in the book of Revelation. This is the same place the escaping Nazis built a base 211 and encountered the fallen angels and humans who were kin and part of Satan's end-time army described in Joel, Amos, and Revelation. This was a fulfillment of Nazi Aryan religious beliefs based on Blavatsky's theosophy. This is only able to happen because of the magnetic pole shift. It happened during the great flood of Noah and is happening again today in our time. Dead things formed in the Hebrew is Rapha, the disembodied spirits, are formed as chul, meaning repaired as a spiral twisting, alluding to the double helix coil, I think. This is being done under the earth, but the Lord sees their discoveries and accomplishments as only destruction. Indicating the same polar shift of the earth will be happening to release this horde. Then the fifth angel sounded, and I saw a star from heaven which had fallen to the earth, and the key of the bottomless pit was given to him. He opened the bottomless pit. Imagine a typical cylindrical key and how it opens and closes. On one axis we have the key and a lining up of several pins that open or close a door by turning them through another axis, like a cross. It would mean there would have to exist two axis planes on earth. All of the biblical evidence points to the two places as being the holes at the poles, as a literal physical bottomless pit, and the other points from the Devil's Triangle to the Dragon's Sea at the 33.3 degree latitude line as the electromagnetic or etherical or spiritual bottomless pit. When these two planes come together, they will release everything into the literal bottomless pit and come out of the melted opening in the Antarctic. This will be during an earth shift of magnetic and physical poles. We had one in 2011 and another is due in 2017. The key would be whenever CERN is started up in conjunction with this shift. A folding of these planes take place, according to Job 41:13, my rendering again. Who can expose his environment to fold together his escape? This is pretty conclusive to what I have been saying. There is more proof. Now let's look at the 8-point description of the locusts that are coming out of the pit. They look like horses prepared unto battle. In other words, they will look like an invading army. They have crowns of gold. Specifically, it's Stephanos in the Greek. This was a particular crown worn only by victorious athletes or heroic warriors. They have faces as men. They will look human. They will have the long hair of a woman. This is a woman's beauty. So these humans will be male and female, very attractive and in great shape. Take notice from the observations from within the UFO community. All Nordics ever encountered were perfect specimens of male and female humans. Never has anyone seen an old frumpy fat person or a bald guy like me. They had lion's teeth. These are specifically the cheek teeth of the canines. They are used by predators to hold the prey in place. In my video in the locust invasion, you can get all the specific scriptures, but a long story short is that this is alluding to the replacement theology that holds followers in place and on target to their desired agenda. They have breastplates of armor. In a spiritual sense, they have a mental resolve to not waver in their goals. In a physical sense, this is immortality. As Joel says, they will fall upon a sword and not be wounded. The scorpion tails are, according to Isaiah, a teacher that teaches lies as a false prophet. God is said to be the head that speaks truth, and the tail is one who speaks lies. They will appear proclaiming a lie. Now for the clincher, the wow moment. The sound of their wings are as the sound of many chariots going into battle. The word in the Greek here does not mean or have anything to do with listening or hearing anything. They will appear proclaiming a lie. Now for the clincher, the wow moment. The sound of their wings are as the sound of many chariots going into battle. The word in the Greek here does not mean or have anything to do with listening or hearing anything. The word is phone. We get our word telephone from this. It literally means a series of numbers as an address. The wings, as I have already shown you, is in reference to the mode of travel by anti-gravity, or the manipulation of electromagnetic forces. This is a description of CERN literally dialing in a mathematical formula via sound to bring in or open a dimensional portal into our own realm of existence. The people at CERN now claim that this is what they are trying to do, open a door and bring another dimension into our own. In two phases, that is exactly what they are doing, opening the bottomless pit. They are like a bunch of kids hitting a hornet's nest with sticks, hoping something good is going to result. Now let's just spend a minute on CERN. The location of the Hadron Particle Collider is in CERN, Switzerland. The exact point of the faculty is resting on the same spot the Temple of Apollo existed in the days of Roman Empire. The shared etymology of Apollo is Apollyon, the name of the leader which comes out of the bottomless pit in Revelation 9. That has to be no coincidence. The Indian government gave the statue of Shiva, the destroyer of planets, doing the dance of the destruction of the elements, to CERN, as they saw their goals as the same as their god Shiva. In order to bring in a new world, they believed the old one had to be destroyed first. The symbol of CERN is 3 sixes set up as a spiral. With all of this, that is not coincidence.
And navigators and seafarers need maps if they're going to sail around the Earth. Now this map is a modern map, and I picked it up at the Library of Congress in the United States. It's an azimuthal equidistant projection centered near Cairo. And in common with all modern maps, it incorporates a number of advanced features. It incorporates highly accurate longitudes, and particularly relative longitudes. And it incorporates an advanced map projection. It isn't easy to represent a spherical object, the Earth, on a flat piece of paper, and to do so with a considerable degree of accuracy. And this is a problem that cartography has had to overcome. So we find good map projections which require advanced mathematics and good relative longitudes. Interestingly enough, there's a category of ancient map which also shows these modern features and which doesn't fit with the received view of the development of human history. One of the most famous of these maps is the Piri-Reis map. And I'm showing it here because I want to compare the projection of this map with the projection here centered on Cairo. Notice the west coast of Africa and the east coast of South America, and coming down here to the Antarctic Peninsula, tonguing up towards the south of South America. It's that precise projection that we find on this 1513 map. Again, there's the west coast of Africa, the east coast of South America. And coming down here, we find a representation of the northern Antarctic Peninsula. In 1513, when Piri-Reis drew the map, Antarctica had not been discovered. In fact, it wasn't discovered until 1818 by our civilization. So there immediately is one anomaly on this map. And another anomaly is the mathematics used in the map projection. And the third anomaly is that it incorporates highly accurate relative longitudes. To do longitudes accurately on maps requires a chronometer, a marine chronometer that will keep accurate time at sea. And again, this was something that our civilization couldn't do until the late 18th century. So this map, fragmentary though it is, appears to incorporate many features that are not supposed to have been known about in 1513. Piri-Reis explains why in these texts that he wrote on the map. He was a Turkish admiral, and he wrote these texts on the map. And what they say is that the map is not his own work. It's a work of synthesis. It's based on more than 20 earlier source maps, that he put all these maps together and derived his own map from these. And unfortunately, the source maps that Piri-Reis used have not survived. Is it possible that the advanced features of this map originate in those lost source maps which Piri Reis told us went back in some cases to before the time of Christ and had come from the long-lost library of Alexandria in Egypt. Another strange thing about the appearance of Antarctica on this map, it's been studied by US Air Force cartographers, and their view is that what we're actually seeing there is the subglacial topography of Antarctica, Antarctica as it looks underneath the ice that now covers it. And this raises the question, how long has Antarctica been covered with the 2-mile thick ice cap that we now presently see on it? Such questions would be irrelevant if there were no other maps in this category. If the Piri Reis map stood alone, the most sensible thing to do would be to dismiss it as a coincidence. But it doesn't stand alone. There's hundreds of other maps that incorporate this same information at a time when our civilization had not yet acquired that information. This is the Mercator map. Mercator is rather famous for his Mercator projection that still dominates most atlases today. It's a 16th century map, and it shows Antarctica 300 years before Antarctica was discovered. And again, it's based on earlier source maps, and again, it incorporates accurate relative longitudes. So also the Orontius Phineus map that we're looking at here, another 16th century map. Mercator includes it in one of his atlases. And here we see Antarctica looking a little bit different, with mountains clearly visible along the coast and rivers running down from those mountains in places where great glaciers are known to run today. It looks on this map as though Antarctica is partially deglaciated. The center of the continent appears to be featureless and ice-covered, but the coast is showing these unglaciated features. What might that mean? This is a map by Philippe Bouache, an 18th century geographer, still a good 100 years before the discovery of Antarctica. And it shows the continent as a kind of archipelago, 2 major land masses divided by a clear waterway running between them. I wonder where he got that idea from. There's a redrawing of the Mercator map and the Orontius Phineus map and the Bouache map. And here to the right, based on seismic surveys conducted in International Geophysical Year in 1958, is a view of what Antarctica actually looks like underneath all that ice that now covers it. We're looking at the subglacial landscape of Antarctica here. And while I wouldn't claim for a moment that the Bouache map is a perfectly accurate representation of the subglacial topography of Antarctica, I think it's much too close to the reality to be dismissed entirely. I think that much more research needs to be done into these anomalous early maps and into the source maps that they rely upon for their information, because we just may be looking at the faint fingerprints of a lost civilization, of a navigating, seafaring civilization that explored and mapped the entire globe long before what we call history began. The issue of the glaciation of Antarctica is a controversial one, and most scholars would say that it has been covered with ice in the form that we see it today for several millions of years. But there is some contradictory evidence, deep sea cores which bring up soils from the ocean bed, which suggest that rivers carrying fine-grained sediments were indeed running down off the coastline of Antarctica until about 10,000 years ago. Maybe that's the period we should be looking at. Maybe something happened in the world around then that we don't fully understand. And in my view, this whole mystery is intimately connected to the mystery of the last ice age and what an ice age is and why the last ice age came suddenly and traumatically to an end at around 12 or 14,000 years ago. You have ice sheets, 6 million square miles of ice covering northern Europe, 2 miles thick as far south as London. You have a similar mass of ice covering much of North America, as far south as the Mississippi Delta, almost into the tropics. This ice is stable for 100,000 years. And then suddenly, almost in the blink of an eye, it all melts. Within just 1,000 or 2,000 years, it's all gone. Sea levels have gone up by 400 feet around the world, and hundreds of animal species have been rendered extinct. No complete explanation for why the last ice age came so suddenly and dramatically to an end has ever been offered by orthodox scholarship. There are clear correlations with astronomical events, including, interestingly, the precession of the equinoxes, which I'll be talking about later. Interestingly, because many of the ancient myths of global cataclysm that I've analyzed in Fingerprints of the Gods incorporate precise information on precession. It's almost as though they're trying to tell us that there's a connection between precession and the ending of ice ages. And lo and behold, we've known for the last 20 years that there is a connection between precession and the end of ice ages. It's a correlation. We don't know what causes this ending of the ice age. I think that this is the period that should be looked at by scholars. This is the period that deserves much more detailed research than it's had. A period in which something awful happened to the Earth, something that brought about a dramatic, tumultuous change, a period in which the face of the Earth was almost literally wiped clean, and a period in which it's perfectly possible, perfectly reasonable to suppose that a high human civilization could have been almost entirely obliterated, leaving only a few survivors and only a few traces of itself for us to wonder at.